whatever you like. And we got one more volunteer here, have we? Volunteer number 2. And volunteer number 3, that one, and the last tank's that one over there, please. Just grab that little cup there, chuck it into that one there. So I'll give it a bit of a stir with our magical whisk. Told you it was a magic show. And all we've done is got potter's clay. It's just what you would make pottery out of. Thinned it right down and mixed it with water. And we've just put them in the tanks. And so that's pretty much a show. You just get to watch here. You can sit there and talk amongst yourselves and just watch oh, well, $15 a fair bit, I guess. All right, look, I'll show you some photos if you like. I've just had it on this, I've got my laptop here, I'm lucky enough, it was just by mistake. Then I went on holidays recently. This is me in Germany. I had a great time in a castle. I love castles. This is a castle we went and saw in France. It was also fantastic. London, if you haven't been there, you've got to. It's magnificent. We loved it. And this was a cow we met in Laos, which was really...
That's good company you're with.
Well, yeah.
Excellent company with, suits you.
Oysters. All right.
Yeah.
Well, look, that's an oyster reef. No one's really seen that. No one knows what an oyster reef is. I took that photo up at Turkey Beach. It's beautiful. So that's about it. So if you could just look at that picture and watch the tanks, that'd be great. I'll tell you a bit about Ozfish then, because that's what I do. Ozfish is I've got something happening here. Yeah, a bit of magic behind the scenes. So Ozfish is set up, it's an Australian-wide organisation, and it's set up to do fish habitat restoration. It was originally set up for fishers, people who like to fish, that see problems in their waterways and want to fix it. So an area that you might not think of as fish habitat is the riparian zone, or the area beside creeks. One of the most important, they shade the water with their leaves, they fall in the water and make snags. Insects feeding on them fall in the water and make food, and they stabilise the banks, and they actually stop a lot of runoff. So really important. We do a lot of that around Australia. We do seagrass restoration. There's a big project happening at the moment down in South Australia where they collect the little seeds and they ferment them and they put them back in the water, which is really cool. Re-snagging, all of our inland waterways were once pulled, all the snags were ripped out. So the easiest way to move your produce around Australia was on the water, not by roads, because there weren't any. So they dragged all the logs out of the woods, and that's really important fish habitat. Fish like Murray cod really need an overhanging log to breed. Without it, they can't breed. The male will clean the log and make it a right place. And if a mummy cod loves his daddy cod very much, she'll lay her eggs on the side of the log where he'll fertilise them and tend them and keep them safe from predators like crayfish and other fish and things like that. So we need our logs back in the water, and that's what we do. And where we can't get logs, we make fish hotels, which is that hashtag you looking one down there. It's a bit off the screen, but that's magic. We also, a lot of irrigators suck up a lot of fish, millions a year, and then put them on the crops, and it kills, if there's any fish stocking or anything like that, they get sucked up and they're basically wasted. So you can do really cool irrigators like that, which are really low pressure but high volume, and it doesn't clog up the nozzles of the irrigators as well. The other thing is fish passage barrier. It's a funny word, but basically all the causeways and places like that means that the fish can't go up and down them anymore. There's nowhere for them to go. And fish locally, like Australian bass, which we like to catch, and a beautiful fish, really important, they need that passage to get up to the fresh water, to live in the winter and then spawn in the sun. So getting rid of those is really cool. We also do a lot of cleanups around Australia, which is really cool. We save fish when it's drying out, do that sort of stuff. And of course, salt marshes and mangroves. The salt marshes are very much unknown. They're an area that's really important for fish production. So Oysters. Alright, we'll talk about oysters. So oysters or shellfish reefs are our most lost habitat in Australia. We've lost 96% of our shellfish reefs, and no one knows about them because they were all gone last century. By 1887, they were basically gone. So no one alive today has seen healthy shellfish reefs in these areas, and we're lucky we found a few. So what are they? So this is some drone footage of shellfish reefs up at Turkey Beach, which is just north of Bundaberg. Massive areas of oysters, and interestingly, they don't grow on rocks. All the oysters we know about here are growing on rocks because that's all they do, all we know. But originally, they're just oysters growing on oysters, and they, one will die, the next will grow on it, and they'll layer up until there's nothing there. So yeah, we've lost all of them in Moreton Bay pretty much. The original map showed, the orange area on the left map showed where shellfish reefs were, and they were really important because we needed them for Moreton Bay. I'll tell you why in a sec. But all those areas are basically gone, there's nothing left. And on the right, the little green image shows subtidal oyster, dredge oysters, where they would actually dredge the bottom and pull those shells up. So why have they gone? The main reason is that they make amazing cement. So if you collect the shells, and what they do is those lumps, they get them and put them in a sugar bag, they take them to a kiln and put sticks in there and burn them. They burn them till they got nice and crispy, they crunch them up, mix them with sand and water, and that was the mortar that went between the sandstone blocks that made Brisbane. So if you go into Brisbane, there's some old sandstone buildings, have a look at the mortar and you'll see little flakes of oyster shell in them, and that's why they're all gone. The other reason we have a lot of floods when we do new roads or we do land clearing, that we had no silt mitigation, we didn't look after our rivers, and huge amounts of silt plumes came down in Moreton Bay. 1893 was the biggest flood we had, took out the Victoria Street Bridge, and it's estimated to have put 60 centimetres, sorry about that, of mud over Moreton Bay bottom. And so a lot of the reefs that were there, the substrate that oysters like to grow on oysters, that was covered with with mud. And today we also put a lot of nutrient back in the water in the form of sewage, so a lot of nitrogen, and the algae can now compete the oysters for space. They'll grow on all the rocky areas, and then they're like a silt trap as well, and so they just grow the algae and not the oysters. So this is in case this doesn't work. This is my bit of backup. With watching video, we're hoping that this one, by the time we're finished, will all be filtered. So it does have an aerator in there, they're just sitting around, but you can see how amazing they are. Little 30 seconds. I put this one up on TikTok and it's got 2.7 million views. So I'm TikTok famous. It's incredible, and it is magic. And the other thing they do is they create structure. So they grow together and they make like reefs, which is why we call them shellfish reefs. And inside those reefs are massive amounts of prawns, worms, crabs, and heaps of invertebrates. And so by putting them back, we can actually make fish. We make about 2.5 tonne of fish per hectare. So the fish in Moreton Bay will be heaps better with fish. Like there's fish.
You said fish. I've been wandering around here. It looks like the tide's been in. It looks like it's gone out. Fishing here. Is that right, everyone?
Yeah.
Line, Eddie.
What about the oyster?
No. No. Hi, Drew.
Where's your fish, Eddie?
So for every hectare that we restore, it actually makes about 2.5 tonnes of fish, which is just the food. I will. So we keep saying shellfish reef and not oyster reefs, and it is predominantly oysters, but it's quite important because it's not just oysters that make these reefs. There's 3 main species that form them in Moreton Bay, and that's the rock oysters, a bit like the Sydney rock oysters. That's not distracting. Sydney rock oysters that we eat, and also there's a pearl oyster, which is locally known as a quampi, and hairy mussel as well. And so they all bond together and they make the reefs. And you can see just on that photo, and this is over at Myora Springs off Strathmingera. There's rock oysters on the top, there's pearl oysters in the middle, and the hairy mussels on the bottom. And it's really interesting that we thought that only rock oysters were Sydney rock oysters. We thought we just had Sydney rock oysters, but we know now with DNA sequencing that there's a lot of different species in the bay, a lot of different species that actually do it. We've been travelling around. I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of scientists, and they have found these ones. So this one's called Lineage B. They don't really have a name yet, but we call them spiky bastards because that's not distracting at all. Have you got one? I think he's got one. So Lineage B, or spiky bastards, is a nickname, are a tropical species that form reefs. So they're really important, especially in tropical areas. There's the Lineage B and the Lineage F, which I don't have a photo of. Well done, Eddie. Form the reefs up there. So these photos are photos I've taken, and really there's no one else has a photo as good as these. These are you're seeing actual really early photographs of them because they've only just been identified. The next one is Lineage I, and they grow on the mangroves in the northern areas. They're more of an isolated one, so they're not reef forming, where Lineage B is leaf forming. I think they're incredibly beautiful and would be really cool. Another one is Lineage G. They're trying to market these as Queensland Gold. When they're younger, they're quite a gold-coloured shell, and they're really, really exciting for oyster industry. They grow really quickly, and really importantly, from the early trials, is there's been no QX disease, which is one of the main diseases that kills the oysters and really makes it hard for Moreton Bay farmers to actually earn a living. So okay, mate. Looks a bit bony.
Wait, Ed. Wait up, Eddie. Wait up. Wait up.
Well done, Eddie. So Lineage G is
I'm an Ostrich member now.
so Lineage G is potentially a game changer for Moreton Bay, and so the scientists that have been looking at this, the genetic sequencing, have really shown that this goes. And so I was talking to Laurie, who's a oyster farmer, yesterday when we went and got our baskets, which we'll talk about in a minute. He is just really angry that they don't have enough of them because the industry's on its knees in Queensland with the QX disease. The last 2 years were really bad, and he got these ones and they were fantastic. So they're really excited about having these oysters, and it could be what we need to revitalise Moreton Bay's industry. So there's other types of oysters as well. These are isonomen or leaf oysters. You can see these in Wynnum Creek if you're any locals. Go down at low tide to where the bridge goes over the creek near the Wynnum Marine, and have a look in there, and there's these weird plate looking things down in there, and heaps of them. It's one of the really interesting places around, one of the only places around. Wynnum Creek is a drain that goes through golf courses, and they've really messed it up, so it's very unhealthy. And so leaf oysters are really great. They'll grow in these areas that aren't very healthy, so go and have a look. Another one we've got is the jingle shells. These look like they're something that will grow really nicely subtidally. On our reefs that we put down subtidally, they're really lovely, a really pretty shell. They look like they're going to be great. Something that will make it viable to do subtidal oysters.
Wait. Fisheries Officer Robbie. Before you put this stuff in here, I can see actually $5,000.
Does look a very official fisheries officer.
Now, Robbie, those 5,000 mussels those shellfish.
Yeah.
No tank.
No tank.
No tank.
All right.
Okay, so that means you can't take them. And if you're going to consume the shellfish like the oysters, they have to be done at the point that they are living.
can the show go on, or do we need to shut it down?
No, the show can go.
Oh, phew, we've got a lot of magic to go through. Thanks, Fisheries Officer. So the really important parts about that is that Moreton Bay has been harvested for so long by people just recreationally going and taking shellfish out of the bay, and so much so that they were so depleted that all of Moreton Bay is a no-take zone for quambies, whelks, mussels, clams, mud arks, all those ones that make great food. You're not allowed to take any. You are allowed to eat oysters, but the only oysters you're allowed to eat are at the rocks. You can open them and eat them there, and that's fine. And also you can take about 20 pippies. I think it's 20 pippies if you're fishing off the beaches, but otherwise it's a no-take. Fortunately, the fish, I'll talk to the fisheries officer in a minute, but these all came from our oyster lease, and we have a license to take all those. So just an interesting thing to know about Moreton Bay. So some areas around Moreton Bay where there are some remnant reefs are Myora over at Minjerribah. So there's some really small clumps, but they're really important. The pearl oyster is incredibly important for First Nations food, and they really want to return, so we're trying to work with them to get that back. Just here at Darling Point, we get some rock oysters around there that do really well, but again, they're just a few oysters growing on a rock. Oyster Point in Wynnum, down near where the old Balls Club was, is great. Green Island's got some clumps growing on it, but the best one's Pumstone Passage. There's some areas there that really do look like the remnant reefs that we see around Australia. They're big and clumpy and tall, and they're working really well, so we do have some. But what we really want to do is go from the one on the left. The left is an image we took with a GoPro on a stick. That's just the inside of Green Island in the mud there a few years back. You can see little bits of flecks of oyster shell, and it's thought that the oyster beds are still under there, but just smothered with that mud that came down the river. So we want to go from that to the one on the right, which is in Marpoon, which is in North Queensland, a little isolated town up there, which is really cool. Oh, I think the magic's working. I think the magic is happening. So yeah, how do we go from that to that? So oysters is substrate. So substrate's just like the base, something that you can have to grow on. You can have the muddy substrate, you can have the rocky substrate. Oyster shell has a chemical signature that's really attractive to oyster spat. So when a mummy and a daddy oyster love each other very much, they broadcast spawn and they make little baby spat, which is a baby oyster, and they're tiny, they're much smaller than a pinhead. And they'll swim around about this sort of speed. I've seen them in a tank, they're really cool. For up to 6 weeks, 3 to 6 weeks, looking for somewhere to land. And they love oyster shell. So if they find a nice oyster shell that's clean, it doesn't have too much algae growing on it, they'll land on that, and they can turn their little cilias, which are like little hairs that help them swim around. They turn into a little bit of a foot, and they can crawl around like a slug and find a little nook and cranny for them to grow on, which is what they prefer. So we thought straight away, we've got thousands of tons of oyster shell going to landfill every year. Let's use this waste product to make our shells. So what did you do with them? A few people have been throwing them in the water and going, they don't work. You're like a pile of shells, it doesn't really work. We think the fish come in and pick the shells up and break their oysters off them. A lot of predators can get to them. For whatever reason, they don't clump up and they don't cause the oysters land on there, but they don't go to adulthood. So we saw in the commercial oyster farmers, if they get a bit lazy or the wind's too blowy and they can't get out to their oyster lease in time, if the oyster leases get squished together, they form clumps, and these clumps are exactly what shellfish reefs do and look like. So we thought, well, what we need to do is contain these shells, grow oysters on them, and then they'll turn into the reefs, try and speed things up. So we developed a few different ways of doing it. The main one we do is the Rob 400, which is robust oyster baskets. I don't know why they called it after Robbie, but they did. Someone did. They've been our main one, and we've started with that. So it's a First Nations design to talk. We talked about the triangle with one of the elders from Cubby Cubby, Fred Palin. We were doing completely different. He said something about it being a triangular prism. I was like, yeah, there's a light bulb moment. And so we ran with that, and there's heaps of advantages to it. We do some bigger ones that we put out, but they're not really community driven. We're a very community based group. So the big ones need a forklift to go and a big boat, and it's not really as good as that. The Bessie bags are something we're trying now, really just recently. They're a biodegradable polymer that's made from birch tree starch. So no petrochemicals in there at all. They degrade into a bit of carbon, not much at all. And the last one is a cod, quilted oyster tuna that we call a cod, like a fish. So the rods are pretty cool. They're lightweight enough to, they weigh about 18 kilos. There's two in there. There's a mini rob and a bigger rob. The big size ones are good for throwing out and just having as a reef and never touching them again. The little ones, what we do is we take them out to our oyster lease and seed them, and then we can pick them up and move them to other places. We've done it with the 400 robs, but they're just so damn heavy, it's really not tenable. We had to get smaller ones. They go from 18 kilos to like 40, 50 kilos. So a heavy two-person lift and really awkward and really sharp. So that's why we've gone to the smaller ones. We get pretty big. So at Shucks Bar, we get a lot of oysters from. We get for East Street and a lot of the commercial oyster shuckers. Doing big deployments now. There's over 2,000 baskets on the barge there that went out earlier this year. It's pretty cool, and then they're growing really well. So these are ones we've got on our oyster lease, and you can see after about 2 years they're just choking with oysters and fast becoming, standalone shellfish reefs in our opinion. So First Nation dining, so it's great reef forming. So the idea of the basket is that it's mild steel, so it rusts away and it's not got much structure after about 2 years, but that's plenty of time for the oysters to cement together, fuse into a bio block or like a shellfish reef, which is really cool. Heaps of animals on there. We don't want to put them through a fish hatchery for a few reasons. One of them, it costs about $130,000 a go to put them through that. We want to catch wild oysters, and we found that there are enough wild oysters in Moreton Bay. And we did talk about a few different species. If you look at this bigger one on the left, you can see there's up the top, there's like a browny red one. Then down the bottom, there's a black one. And then on the top left corner, there's little lumpy ones. They'll all be different species of spat, and we don't know what. But by putting them out on our oyster lease and catching our oysters wild from what's in there, we know that they're oysters that are viable, that are actually going to grow in the bay. The genetic diversity of that species is really good, so you don't get like a genetic bottleneck where they might have something that goes wrong and the predator can take advantage of that. And you get species diversity, so heaps of different species doing heaps of different things. And so they grow in their own way. So the Bessies, we talked about that. They're pretty cool too, you can just throw them out. We're in really early trials of these. They're really nice, they're really easy to carry. The rods are quite sharp and annoying and quite heavy, where the Bessies are easy to fill, they're quick, they're light, they're nicer to carry around, no scratches. But we don't know enough about them. We put them out on our lease. We're already finding that there's a lot of algae growing on them, and we don't know that that's going to be a problem. We already know that they're not quite as high off the bottom, so that's why we've stacked some of those up to see if that works. Some of the bags have already, like, you bump them and they can tear, or if you mishandle, they tear. But gosh, it'd be great if they work. If they work, it'd be really great. So we're working really hard to try and make them work and see how they go. Be a year or so before we can really work it out, but they're really great. And then the cods, we put our first ones in this last month in November. So these are ones at the Southport School on the Nerang River. The first ones in the world ever to go in. I'm really excited about it. So this is an attempt into making the rock walls, which don't have that much growing on, into living seawalls. So we talked about all the nooks and crannies. You can say words like chirogosity, and you can say interstitial spaces. But basically it just means, yeah, that's some magic. The little holes and the ledges, and oysters like the underside of things as well. So having all those shapes and things for them works really well, whereas a rock, it's got nothing. You can have oysters growing on the outside, but you can't have anything growing on the inside. So by having these really complex shapes, is another word, complex, they do really well, and they make them living seawalls. Catchphrase. And we talked about community involvement, and it's not important, it's essential in my opinion to have a really strong community involvement. There's a story in America of a reef that went in Chesapeake Bay that was growing really, really well. And they had oysters growing and they were looking like they're coming back. They had a change of government, and the new councillor had friends that were in the oyster dredge industry, and they were broke. They had nowhere to go. All the oysters were gone, and they could see these oysters there, and they got in his ear, and they said, "We just want to feed our family." And nobody was going, okay. So the story goes that at 9 a.m. they opened it up for dredging. By 11 a.m. they were all gone. And so a completely wasted process of what could have been a restored reef that could be managed, more of them, plenty for the dredgers, oysters to get, all that sort of stuff. So by involving the community in these projects intimately, and you've seen some of the awesome acting today already, we foster a sense of ownership. They own these reefs. They literally own them. They built them. They got scratched by the dodgy rocks. They put them in the water, and so the sense of stewardship comes through with that. And hopefully they'll be there forever, because no one will be, they know how important they are, and they know how hard they are to put back in. So that's something that's really cool. Because, the other thing is it's all about fishing, and fish, because I love the fish. Here's a fish I caught. That's a nanny guy. I really like that one. And this is
That's not in the bay, that's in the creek.
yeah,
See the creek.
well, New Guinea black bass, I really like that. So yeah, so I've got some more photos of fishes here. Back to the oysters. It's fish though. So we really need to know, do they work? Like, it's nice enough for me to, the magic's happening, and I'll invite you to come up later and you can actually see the pseudo-feces. That could be the word for today, pseudo-feces. Magic word. But it's all right for us to say or declare that they work, but we need to prove it. We want to put thousands and thousands of hectares of these back. And if we're putting back something that's a bit dodgy or doesn't work and doesn't do anything at all and is a detriment, well, we're not going to get the money to do it, we're not going to get the batting, we're not going to get the approvals. So we need to work out it. And they look like they work. So the one on the right is 3 years old, and the one on the left is a rock that just magically looked the same as the one. I only looked at a few thousand reefs to find one that looked a lot like it, Rob. They look like it, but do they do these things? Do they build a habitat? Do they filter the water? Do they have the shellfish species that are reef forming as opposed to a few oysters growing on them? Do they have the mobile invertebrate species like the crabs, the prawns, the worms, those sorts of things? Do they have the benthic species? So benthic means the bottom of the water, and so there's a lot of life that lives in there. We're seeing that around our oyster reef, our oyster reefs where we're putting our reefs, seagrass is coming back. Completely anecdotal, but it really is coming back. And we know that the oyster farmers always have seagrass growing very strong and healthy under their baskets, because the pseudo-feces is also food, and food for plants and other animals. So what benthic species, including plants, are there? Are they self-sustaining, or is it something we're going to need to top up again and again? And do they keep growing? Do they keep getting bigger? Oh, I should have pressed the button. I had a nice video I didn't set up, sorry. There you go, you'll see it anyway. So to do that, like we've talked about, we go and visit the reefs. This one was fairly well known. It's just in Proserpine, on the Proserpine River, the most crocodile-infested river in Australia. And they're really good, strong, healthy reefs. They're growing on rock, and they're really deep. They're 2-3 foot deep of oyster shells. So that was really cool to see. And then Gladstone Harbour has fantastic reefs growing in there. Some of them are growing on rocks, a lot of them are growing just on the muddy substrate. And they're deep, like they're this deep, some of them. So they're really, really healthy. And again, no one knew until this year, no one had visited Gladstone Harbour to see the reefs there, and no one had actually gone, oh, there's shellfish reefs there. Weeper, Beck and I did a trip around Australia, and we found these ones in Weeper that no one knew were there. Like, they just weren't studied. Everyone thought that reefs were temperate, so meaning from the southern colder waters where rock oysters grow, New South Wales coast and stuff like that. And no one knew how important and how many there are in tropical areas, because no one knew about lineage B, the spiky bastard. So it's one that you need. They're the main species for here. So finding these was new to science. And we use mapping technology, just a Queensland globe. It's just a map, and you can see them actually on the map if you're lucky enough to have the photo taken at low tide. You can actually see the reef structures. And this is Marpoon, and that's all oyster reefs, really healthy. This high, no rock, most of it, been there forever. It's known as one of the other things. And they're really lovely, they make really cool shapes, really lovely different... Oh yeah, that one looks a bit like a Mickey Mouse ears. So, yeah, they do, they make really cool shapes. And we do a lot of fisher science or citizen science. So what we're doing is showing you the filtration. So this is our control. So we get all sciencey. This is what it looked like at the beginning with no impact, no oysters on it. This one's choking with oysters. We did that deliberately so it's really fast. And this one is got one of our rods in it, so we'll see how that goes. It's cleaner than that. And I think it's starting to work. But the way you can really tell it's working is the pseudofeces. I say that very mellow. But yeah, you can come up and you see it because we use the red mud. You can see that pseudofeces very well. Pseudofeces. Oh yeah. So it's important that we work closely with the universities. The three main in southeast Queensland that are actually working in shellfish reef restoration: the Griffith University of Queensland and University of Sunshine Coast. So they tell us how to do it, how to be citizen scientists. And they developed a destructive survey, which is really sad because you get a rob and you have to rip it to pieces and kill everything in it, put it in jars of ethanol. But it's really important. So we found that from our reefs, press the wrong button. That we found from our reefs. There we go. That we have some of our reefs subtidal. So subtidal means they're always wet. When at low tide, the area below that is subtidal, so always wet. And intertidal is the one that gets dry at low tide. So in our subtidal reefs, we get 626 shellfish on each one. But in the intertidal, on the banks that dry out, there's over 2,500 shellfish on each one. And it's interesting that flips when you look at the other animals that are growing on there. Subtidally, we get 1,120 other animals on each one of those, and 748 on each one of those in the intertidal zone. That is magic. Also, we want to work out, why are you not doing that anymore? How much they filter. So UQ have been really cool. We gave them 10 of our baskets they set up at their facility at Dunwich. And they've got their tanks going, and they've found that it's not quite there, 90 to 145 litres per hour on each one of those, every one of those. So that's day in, day out if they're subtidal, and that's 12 hours a day if they're intertidal. So what does that mean? It's magic. So that's 4.2 million additional shellfish in the bay today. We put out 6,700 of those in the bay. They're out there right now. 4.2 million additional shellfish. I can't really read that. 7.5 million additional invertebrates. 181 tonne of additional biomass, so like actual living structure weight. 775,100 litres of seawater filtered. That's 6.78 billion litres every year. 25 tonnes of additional harvesting fish. So we made a really big impact, and we've just begun. Like literally, no one knows about us. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Crowd participation is. I don't think I can, but we'll set it. No. So they're all saying. So what's next? We need more projects. We've got our lease that the Port of Brisbane is fantastic. They let us have an area at Oyster World, we call it, which has got where we do all our building and all that, and they've got a subtidal lease at the mouth of the Brisbane River, and they've also given us a fish habitat area in the river itself, right near the mouth that we just got last month, and so we're going to be putting big areas through there, and Yeah, we want to do it properly. So we want to do it pretty, because oyster reefs are beautiful. Like, they're absolutely beautiful in my opinion. Like, if you get up close, you might get mud on your boots. But I think they're stunning. And you know, there's some aerial shots of the reef design of the real ones in Turkey Beach that we really love. And so we're thinking we should do something like this. Some nice lines. There's stripes, stripy lines.
Be more creative. The shape of an oyster.
You don't like that?
What's the oyster shape?
Well, it's a good thing. There's amazing people like Patrick Cookwell, who is a Stradbroke Island Ninjaraba artist, Nunakal, songman, dancer, and we asked him what he would think they should be looking like, and he came up with that artwork, which is owned by Oyster, but somehow it's in my house for a while. And we needed a canvas. It does look like an oyster, thank you, and a bit of a heart maybe. So that's Green Island. So if you don't know Green Island, when you leave today, look that way, that's Green Island, the closest one in here. And it's got massive areas of intertidal reef, flat reef. It's been harvested for shellfish for 100 and something years, nearly 200 years. It's denuded, so it's basically a coral. It's the most southern coral cay in the world, and it's been absolutely cleared flat by bulldozers and stuff like that. So there's nothing growing on, and the oysters need something to get up off the bottom. So it's a perfect spot. So if we got Paddy's artwork and did an outline like that, and put it on the island, it could look something like that. So the idea is to map it out with aerial photography, drones, equipment, mark it out pretty quickly, and then put 42,000 of our baskets out in that pattern out there. So 42,000 will make massive amounts of it. So Patrick's really personally very excited about it, because each one of the reefs we find is about 110 pearl oysters, known as quampies locally. And that's their favourite. They love it. It's a really important food. And it's very healthy and something they really want back in their healthy sea country. So they're pretty excited. 42,000 times 110 is lots. I don't have that sort of magic. So yeah, so there you go. So that's that. And I just put one more slide up because in case it didn't work, which it did, we should have that. So you just watch that for a bit. And what's that? Song?
Music.
Oh, that was lucky. Come on up. So invite the Oysterfish volunteers to come on up. Probably just one on the stage, and because we've got a few issues. We've got a really amazing song. You're going to be so impressed. Yeah. You're very welcome to sing along. Oh, sorry, mate. Just watch the chord there. Just watch the chord. Yeah, you're ready to go. Yeah, you're ready to go.
Everybody looking?
I'd hang about with all my mates and filter all the water in the bay. So help us please fulfill our hopes of making lots of new of the immortal bay. Hey! I'd like to be under the garden in the bay. Oyster reef in the bay, on an oyster reef with you. Thank you. There must be a way. We're selling CDs outside. They're $80 a pop, but you know, all funds go to our drink accounts for Christmas. But I can't leave it there. I just had to show you some amazing photos of fish of me, because that's what it's all about. It's about me. But excitingly, I've got two of my beautiful family here today. That one flew up from Melbourne and one came from Ashgrove. And the third one can't be here today because she's in hospital sadly. So we're sending lots of love and best wishes to my mum, who's doing really well, but can't be here. So that's the show. Thank you, everyone. I invite you to come up and have a good look at the pseudo-feces. And because I think it's really interesting. So what they do, but just come up one at a time. You can come up now whenever you like. What they actually do is they suck in all the water and they have a first filtration that takes all the solids to a certain size out and stores them. It's a bit like when you eat a watermelon. They go through and pick out the seeds and they put it in a little mucus ball and spit it out. And that mucus ball is heavier than water and settles on the bottom and becomes part of the reef and part of the whole structure. So a really important part is the pseudo-feces. Come and see some. Thank you. Oh, I had a magical hat show thing that I forgot to do. Sorry. Not very well polished, so right. Yeah.
George, that you're going to be here. I wish I
I could have brought my tripod if I knew.
Yeah, I wish I knew how many person to be doing Have you ever heard that talk before?
I knew nothing about it until Georgia. No.
Yeah, do you live Oh, well, yeah.
I mean, I've only been in the Bay Area for a couple of years. But Gold Coast.
Near the water. Yeah. Well, so we just started, you know, when he was in his
I've heard about it, but I didn't know much about it.
and he couldn't really do his own violin. And so
That was that. 6 years.
Yeah. And so then he was sort of looking around like, what did he do to manage this sort of he was in and out of surgery. And then this sort of came up. And he just went through that way and then it just snowballed and snowballed. So now it's a job. Yeah, it's a volunteering and basically it's in its infancy when he joined and they're just growing like naturally. So central Melbourne is all about Oyster reefs and other stuff. They've got chunks in you know, they do seagrass planting and coral and South Australia. They do a lot of riparian stuff throughout the Murray-Darling. Just wherever they're seeing fish habitat, freshwater, so yeah, that was right up Robin's alley. Just sort of, and then just became his passion.
As well as fishing.
Yeah. It's really fun. And now it's like obsession.
Obsession.
They're making, like, it's massive. If you're ever bored, go and visit the shellfish recycling facility in the water Brisbane. Yeah, he goes there like, he's there for his days or whatever, a couple of times a week. And George is one of the volunteers. But they make working bees and stuff where they bake and have like live honey machines and sifting machine.
Proper making for oysters.
Literally. It's just like all these things rolled into one. And he does a lot of stuff. All of his previous experiences.
It's funny how also.
Yeah, it is. It's like he likes, you know, It's worked out amazing.
Fantastic.
And Tom Oliver has organised the Fringe Festival. Yeah, he's the right job. He's the Fringe Festival concept. And Robert knows him from other bits and pieces. And so he said, why don't you give you a 10 and you can talk. So that's what started all of this.
Yeah, right. So he's only done one presentation.
He does lots of like, uni,
Only one year.
BCF, only 1 year. This is one-off. Because the fish tanks have done that salt water, they had to pump it out of the ocean into a big tank and the oysters have to be like fresh and alive and hard to repeat. He does that mini version, he does that quite often. He'll take that to like the convention centre and give it some time and it's just the best way of explaining it to me. That's why I like crazy on TikTok. It's just such a, before and after. But yeah, no, he's just learned. He's taught himself all of this from nothing. He's literally done a bachelor and a PhD in shellfish reefs. Unofficially. You know what I mean? Like he's reading papers.
Well, he could probably be ticked off like that.
Yeah, other academics like reading, using stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just weird.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so he's self-taught though, and he's got his really good fruit helpers, so they mostly be farmers. And they're down there like every week they're down there working their guts out. He needed a hand today and it was like 8 hours turn.
That's important. I'm involved with the community as well, non-profit. I'm a president of Redlands Next to Life program, and we put on workshops and classes every week. We have about 300-400 members in our organisation and volunteers. We do study therapy programs for intellectually impaired individuals. We're a really inclusive organisation. We dance exercise and we put on a show and everything at the end of each year at the Redlands Performing Arts Centre. Yeah.
So good. So it's about keeping people engaged.
Active, engaged, creative, healthy.
Coming from film and TV, like he was so like by the end he was pretty jaded about like he worked hard off selling McDonald's or whatever, selling everything. It's not all like that, you know what I mean? Like it's
I felt much the same way. I felt used and abused in the film industry. There's a lot of unethical practice. I actually believe it made me quite ill. It made me sick. I got cancer. How does that sense? I was spraying a lot of urethane, caves and stuff like that. That far. And I was working in crops. Using a lot of toxic chemicals. I'd come off the back of Superman and I felt extremely ill. Found out I had cancer. And then when I looked into the type of chemicals I was using, it wasn't good. And the correlation between the timing and coming off that, my immune system broke down. And since then I know of half a dozen people that worked in that area prior to me diagnosed with
it's such an unregulated industry. It's just got to be done. It's not like
that's right, especially back in the early 15 years ago.
So how long ago was that? You were diagnosed?
So I was first diagnosed
see you up there.
Are you gonna?
I believe so.
You might. If you do, you do.
I
I
just
don't know
got to
how
get all
long we'll
this
stay,
back.
but
Whatever.
whatever happens. Level. Main Butterfield entrance. The park.
Oh, mate, Butterfield entrance. Oh, yeah. All right, well, I should
Yeah. I want to say hello to him before.